I never thought my life would end here, at the edge of a cliff, the taste of salt in my mouth and betrayal burning in my chest. But when it's your own child pushing you into the abyss, death is no longer just a fear, it's a decision. And in that moment, as my husband's hand found mine and his lips brushed my ear with a whisper, "Pretend we're dead," I knew we still had a chance. The air was thin and cold. The sky above was a bruised purple, the kind of color you see before a storm. I could barely breathe. The impact had knocked the air from my lungs, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Daniel's shadow loomed above us at the cliff's edge, a black silhouette against the fading sun. He didn't come closer. He just stared down, waiting, watching, his chest rising and falling as if he were trying to convince himself of what he had done. I wanted to scream his name. I wanted to claw my way back up the rocks and demand an explanation. But Michael's fingers squeezed mine, and the pressure told me everything. Don't move, don't breathe, don't let him know. So I lay there, blood pooling under my shoulder, my face turned to the jagged stone, my body limp like a broken doll. Daniel stepped closer, peered over the edge. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought he'd climb down to finish it, to make sure. But instead, he muttered something I couldn't hear, turned his back, and walked away. Gravel crunched under his shoes, fading with every step until there was nothing but the howl of the wind and the crash of the waves below. "Stay still," Michael whispered again, his voice like splintered glass. "He's gone. Just stay." I stayed. We both did. Long after the sun vanished and the cliff became nothing but darkness. Only when the night had fully swallowed the world did Michael pull himself up, groaning, his face ghost white and slick with blood. We were still alive, barely. "I can't move my leg," he said, his voice low. "We can't stay here." I tried to push myself up, but every muscle screamed. My arm was warm and sticky, blood. I didn't even know from where, but I forced myself to my knees, then to my feet. The rocks cut into my palms. But I welcomed the pain. It meant I wasn't dead. We stumbled, crawled, dragged ourselves down the cliffside until we found a narrow ledge, then a path hidden between two boulders. It led into a small grove, the trees clawing at the night sky like dark fingers. We didn't speak. We didn't even cry. We just moved, like two shadows, as far from that cliff as our bodies would take us. Hours later, we collapsed inside a rusted, half-forgotten shack miles away. The wood smelled of damp and rot. It wasn't safe. It wasn't home. But it was somewhere Daniel wouldn't think to look. Only then did I take out the picture from my jacket pocket. Daniel at 10 years old, hair sticking up like a wild bird's nest. His smile wide and innocent. I pressed it to my chest and whispered, "Why, Daniel? Why?" Michael sat against the wall, clutching his leg, eyes closed. "We can't go home," he muttered. "If he thinks we're dead, that's our only chance." I looked at him, my hands trembling. He tried to kill us. Saying it out loud was like swallowing broken glass. Michael opened his eyes, and for the first time in our 27 years of marriage, I saw pure terror there. "He's not the boy we raised," he said. "Not anymore." I thought back to the nights Daniel would come home late, his face pale, his hands shaking, the calls he wouldn't explain, the money that went missing. I'd asked questions, and he'd snapped, his eyes going cold, his voice turning sharp. "Mom, stop," he'd said once. "It's for your own good." But I hadn't stopped, and now here we were. I wrapped a rag torn from my sleeve around Michael's wound, my fingers slick with his blood. "We need proof," I whispered. "We can't go to the police without it. They won't believe us." Michael nodded slowly, his jaw clenched. "We'll stay dead," he said, "until we have everything." I stared at him, feeling something harden inside me. We were no longer parents. We were survivors. In the distance, a branch snapped. My breath caught. We both froze, listening. Another crack. Footsteps. Michael's hand found mine again, his fingers digging into my skin. He mouthed a single word. quiet. For a long time there was only silence. Then the sound faded away. An animal, maybe. Or maybe not. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window of the shack, watching the trees sway in the darkness, the photograph of Daniel pressed to my lips. Somewhere out there was our son. Somewhere out there was the boy who had just tried to erase us. And somewhere inside me, a new voice was whispering, low and fierce, "We're coming back. We're not done yet." The night was long. The pain was deep, but by morning, the fire had begun to burn. We weren't just going to survive. We were going to make him face what he'd done. We were going to come back from the dead. The morning came with a cold bite in the air, and for the first time since the fall, I saw the sunlight break through the trees. It should have felt like hope, but all I felt was the ache of betrayal, sharper than the pain in my arm. Michael tried to stand, but his leg buckled beneath him, and he let out a low groan. I caught him before he fell, guiding him back down onto the rotting floorboards. His face was pale, sweat beading across his brow. I knew that look. He was tougher than anyone I'd ever known. But the pain was eating through him. "We can't stay here long," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then where?" I asked, my throat tight. He stared at me, his eyes hard. "Somewhere he won't expect. Somewhere we can watch him." The words sent a chill down my spine. We were no longer hiding from the world. We were hiding from our own son. I pulled the photograph from my pocket again, running my thumb over Daniel's smiling face. 10 years old. That was the boy I still saw in flashes. The boy who once begged me not to leave his side during thunderstorms. The boy who swore he'd never hurt a soul. How had that boy grown into the man who had pushed us off a cliff? The answer was waiting, somewhere inside Daniel's secrets. And if we wanted to survive, we had to find it. By the second night, I slipped out of the shack alone. My steps were quiet, deliberate. Michael wanted to come, but his body wouldn't let him. "Be careful," he warned, gripping my hand so tight it hurt. "He won't forgive a mistake." I moved through the trees, every sound magnified, the crunch of twigs under my boots, the whisper of the leaves above. It was only miles away, but it felt like a lifetime before I reached the town. Daniel's car wasn't at the house. Good. I circled around the back, crouched low, and slid the spare key from under the loose brick where we'd always kept it. My hands shook as I turned it in the lock. The door creaked open, and I froze, listening. Silence. The house smelled different, cold, sterile, nothing like the home I had built. I stepped into the kitchen first, my kitchen, where I had made pancakes every Sunday morning, where Daniel used to steal bites of cookie dough from the bowl. But it wasn't the same. The counters were clean, too clean. The fridge was empty. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a cover. I moved to his room. My breath caught as I pushed the door open. Gone were the posters, the clutter, the signs of life. In their place, papers, documents scattered across the desk, numbers scrawled in a hand I barely recognized. And then I saw it. A folder left half open, stuffed with receipts, ledgers, and something worse, photographs, grainy, taken at night. People exchanging envelopes, shaking hands in parking lots. My son wasn't just mixed up in something shady. He was at the center of it. I picked up one of the photos, and my blood ran cold. Daniel stood in the frame, his face hard, his hand reaching out to take a briefcase from a man in a black coat. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, clutching the photo like it was a blade that had cut me. My Daniel, my boy. But I couldn't stop there. I rifled through more papers. Offshore accounts, shell companies, transactions with names I didn't recognize, but knew were dangerous. This wasn't just crime. It was power. And we had stumbled too close to it. Suddenly, I heard it, a car door slamming shut outside. My heart froze. I shoved the papers back into the folder and slid it into my jacket. My hands were shaking as I crept down the stairs, every creak sounding like thunder in the silence. The front door opened. Footsteps, heavy, calm. He was home. I slipped out the back, every nerve screaming, and darted into the trees. I didn't stop running until the house was far behind me, my lungs burning, the folder pressed tight against my chest. When I finally stumbled back into the shack, Michael's eyes widened at the sight of me. "What did you find?" he rasped. I dropped the folder onto the floor between us, my breath ragged. "Proof," I whispered. He opened it, his eyes scanning the contents, his face growing darker with every page. Finally, he looked at me, his voice shaking with rage and grief. "Our son has become a monster." And in that moment, I understood something I had never wanted to face. Daniel hadn't pushed us off that cliff out of panic or fear. He had done it because he knew we had found out. And if he learned we were still alive, he would come back to finish what he started. Would you like me to keep building directly into the parents' revenge arc now, where they start planting traps and gathering allies while Daniel grows more paranoid? Or should I deepen this section further with Daniel's perspective and descent into his criminal life first, so the audience feels the full contrast between the son they raised and the man he became? When Michael said the words, "Our son has become a monster," I wanted to fight him. I wanted to scream that he was wrong, that Daniel was still in there somewhere, buried under all the money and secrets. But deep down, I knew. I had seen it too. And yet, there was a part of me that couldn't stop asking why. I remember the boy he used to be, the boy who spent hours building Lego castles, who hugged me so tight before his first day of school that I had to pry him off. He was sensitive, tender-hearted. He cried when his goldfish died. He once gave his only cookie to a kid who had none. That was Daniel, my Daniel. So where had he gone? The answer, I think, began years ago. It was after Michael lost his job at the factory. Money was tight, too tight. We tried to shield Daniel from it, but kids always see more than we think. He started talking about how he'd make us rich one day. At first, it was sweet, innocent, but then he got older, and those promises turned into something else. I should have seen the change. He started dressing sharper than the other boys, talking about things we didn't understand, investments, quick profits, people who could open doors. He never told us where the money came from, but suddenly he always had some. New shoes, a shiny watch, cash folded neatly in his wallet. I asked him once, late at night, when I found him counting bills at the kitchen table, "Daniel, where is this coming from?" He looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize, cold, calculated, and he said, "Don't worry about it, Mom. This is for us, for us." That was how he justified it. Every lie, every secret, every crime, he told himself it was for his family. But the truth was, he was slipping into a world that would eat him alive. And when we tried to pull him back, when we asked too many questions, that's when he saw us as the enemy. I remember one fight, months before the cliff. Michael had found a strange number on Daniel's phone bill, one that showed up dozens of times. He asked Daniel about it at dinner. The look on our son's face still haunts me. "You need to stop digging," Daniel said. His voice was low but sharp. "You don't know who you're messing with." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "You're my son. If you're in trouble, we're in trouble. Tell us the truth." But Daniel just stood, his chair scraping across the floor. He leaned close, his eyes narrowing. "Dad, if you love me, you'll let this go." And then he walked out the door. That was the night I first felt fear in my own home, not of strangers, not of criminals, but of my son. Now, sitting in that shack with the folder of proof between us, I realized that fear had been justified. We hadn't just uncovered secrets. We had uncovered the truth about the man Daniel had become. He wasn't trying to protect us. He was trying to silence us. I pressed my palms to my face, the tears hot and bitter. "We raised him," I whispered. "We gave him everything. How could he—" Michael cut me off, his voice like steel. "This isn't about what we gave him. This is about what he chose. And if we don't stop him, he'll destroy more than just us." I lifted my head, my vision blurred. Stop him? How? Michael's eyes flickered to the folder. By making sure the world knows who he really is. That was the moment it changed for me. The grief didn't vanish, but it hardened into something sharper, something stronger. My son had pushed me off a cliff to bury me in silence, but I was alive. And if he wanted me gone, then I would do the one thing he feared most. I would speak, and I would not stop until the truth burned his empire to the ground. The folder sat between us like a ticking bomb. Every page, every number, every shadowy face, it was enough to ruin him, enough to end the empire our son had built out of lies. But it wasn't enough to save us. Not yet. We need more, Michael said. His voice was hoarse but steady. This proves he's involved, but we need to show what he's planning, who he's working with. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it was enough already, that we could take this to the police. But a sick feeling twisted in my gut. I knew Michael was right. Daniel's connections were too deep, too dangerous. Without undeniable proof, we'd just end up looking like bitter parents inventing a story to cover our son's sins. No one would believe us, not until it was too late. So we stayed dead. We told no one, not our friends, not our family. We vanished into the cracks, shadows among shadows, while Daniel lived his life as if nothing had happened. But I was watching, always watching. I crept into town again and again, moving like a ghost through the places Daniel once called home. And each time, I saw less of the boy I knew and more of the man he had become. He didn't walk the way he used to. He carried himself like someone untouchable, someone feared. The people around him, men in suits, women with hard eyes, never laughed, never smiled. They followed, they obeyed, and Daniel thrived in it. But there was something else too, a tension, a sharpness in his movements, as though he could feel a shadow breathing down his neck. He was paranoid. He checked over his shoulder constantly, scanned every room he entered. He knew someone was out there watching him. He just didn't know it was us. One night, I followed him. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it would give me away. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know where he went, who he met. He drove out past the edge of town to a warehouse by the docks, the kind of place that smelled of rust and old secrets. I crouched low in the shadows, the night air biting at my skin, as he met with a man I recognized from the photographs. The briefcase was there again. The exchange was quick, but I caught one word, just one. Shipment. The man clapped Daniel on the shoulder, and for a moment, Daniel's mask slipped. He smiled, not the warm, crooked grin I remembered, but something sharp and cold. And in that moment, I felt the truth cut through me. This wasn't just business. This was power, control. A world built on silence. And we had broken that silence. I barely made it back to the shack before dawn. Michael was waiting, his face drawn, his leg bound tight with strips of fabric. I dropped beside him, breathless, and told him everything. He listened, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. He just stared at the floor. Finally, he said, "He's deeper in than I thought." I reached for his hand, trembling. "What do we do?" Michael looked at me then, his eyes blazing with something I hadn't seen since the cliff. Not fear, not grief, fire. "We get close," he said. "We let him think he's won. And then, when he's certain we're gone, we take everything from him." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. For the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about saving Daniel anymore. This was about surviving him. We weren't just his parents now. We were his hunters. The days blurred together, but the fire inside us never dimmed. Every night, I went back into Daniel's world, slipping through shadows, searching for cracks in his empire. Every morning, I came back to Michael with scraps of information, dates, names, places. Piece by piece, we were building the truth. But then, one night, I found something that stopped me cold. I was in his office again. The house was dark, silent. I had grown bolder by then, slipping through the rooms like I had every right to be there. I knew Daniel's patterns, when he left, when he came home, or at least I thought I did. The drawer I opened should have been empty. It had been before, but this time there was a flash drive tucked inside, small, harmless looking. I slipped it into my pocket without thinking. Back at the shack, Michael and I huddled around an old laptop we'd scavenged. My hands shook as I plugged it in. At first, it was nothing but spreadsheets, numbers, codes, balances, the same as before. But then, videos, dozens of them, each file labeled with a date. I clicked one. The screen flickered to life, grainy and dark, and there he was, Daniel, our son. Standing in a warehouse, his face hard, his voice sharp as he barked orders to men twice his size. They listened to him, feared him. I clicked another. This time, he was meeting with the man in the black coat. They shook hands, exchanged words I couldn't hear. But then I saw it. In the corner of the frame, blurred but unmistakable, was us, Michael and me. Photographs of us pinned to a board, notes scrawled underneath, times, dates, places. He had been watching us, tracking us, his own parents. I froze, my breath locked in my throat. Michael's hand gripped my shoulder, hard. "Play another," he said. I clicked again. This one was clearer. Daniel was alone, pacing. His face was twisted, his words low but sharp, caught by the camera. "They know too much. They won't stop. I can't let them destroy this. I have no choice." He slammed his fist against the table, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, but if you won't let me protect you, I'll have to silence you." The room spun around me. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. Those words, my son's words, seared into me like fire. He had convinced himself that killing us was an act of mercy, that erasing us was love twisted into its cruelest form. Michael shut the laptop, his jaw clenched, his hands trembling. "He planned it," he said, his voice raw. "The cliff wasn't impulse, it was a choice." I pressed my hands to my mouth, trying to hold in the sob that ripped through me. Our son hadn't just betrayed us. He had studied us, prepared for us, decided that our lives were expendable the moment we became a threat. And that was the truth I could never unsee. Daniel wasn't just dangerous. He wasn't just lost. He was deliberate, and he would do it again. Michael's eyes burned into mine, his voice low, steady, unshakable. Then we make him believe his plan worked. We stay dead, and when the time is right, he lifted the flash drive in his hand, the faint glow of the laptop screen lighting his face. We used this to bury him instead. The fire in his eyes met the fire in mine, and I knew the game had shifted. We weren't running anymore. We were waiting. From that night forward, something inside me changed. Until then, I had been running on fear, on grief, on the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Daniel wasn't lost forever. But the flash drive erased every trace of doubt. He had planned to kill us. He had studied us, mapped out our lives like we were pawns on a board. And pawns can only move one way. But queens? Queens can move anywhere. I was done being a pawn. Michael and I made a vow in that shack, a vow stronger than any we'd ever spoken at an altar or in front of witnesses. We would not run. We would not hide. We would make our son believe he had won, and then we would strip everything he had built, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the truth. The first step was silence. Dead people don't write letters, don't make phone calls, don't leave footprints in the world. So we vanished completely. The house remained untouched, the bills unpaid, the neighbors whispering about tragedy. For all the world knew, we had been lost in an accident, our bodies claimed by the sea. And Daniel, he thrived in that silence. I watched him from afar, slipping through shadows, studying his every move. At first, he was triumphant, his shoulders squared, his voice sharp, his empire expanding. But time has a way of gnawing at a guilty conscience. And as weeks passed, cracks began to show. He grew restless, paranoid. At dinners with his associates, I saw him glance toward the door again and again. On the street, he looked over his shoulder, his hand twitching at his side. In quiet moments, when he thought no one was watching, his mask slipped, and I saw it. The fear. The gnawing suspicion that maybe, just maybe, his parents weren't as silent as he had hoped. One night, as I hid in the shadows across from his house, I saw him tear apart his office in a frenzy. Papers scattered, drawers ripped open, furniture overturned. He was searching for something, the flash drive. Michael leaned closer to me, his voice low. He knows it's missing. And with that, the balance shifted. Daniel was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted, though he didn't know by whom. Michael and I began planting seeds. A document left where it shouldn't be. A shadow glimpsed in a window. A voicemail from a blocked number, playing back his own words. I'll have to silence you. We never revealed ourselves. Not yet. Just whispers in the dark. Just enough to make him question his sanity. And it worked. I watched the man who once carried himself like a king unravel day by day. His temper grew sharper, his smile tighter, his nights longer. His allies whispered behind his back, and in every flicker of his eyes, in every shake of his hand, I saw the truth. He was afraid. Afraid of the ghosts he had created, afraid of us. The power had shifted. We weren't the ones hiding anymore. We were the storm gathering at the edge of his world, and soon we would strike. Daniel's empire began to rot from the inside. It didn't happen all at once. No, it was slow, like rust creeping along iron, weakening it until the first storm tears it apart. His meetings grew tense. His voice cracked when he barked orders. His associates began to trade wary glances, doubt seeping into their loyalty. And we fed that doubt. Every move we made was calculated, deliberate. We never showed our faces, never spoke our names. Only the smallest nudges, documents slipped into the wrong hands, secrets whispered at the right moment, a photograph mailed with no return address. Always the same photograph, him on the cliff, standing above the edge, staring down where he had left us. He couldn't prove who sent them, but he knew. I saw it in his eyes one night as he stood outside his office, the photo trembling in his hand. His lips moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear. Maybe my name, maybe Michael's. He was seeing ghosts. That's when we knew it was time. Michael's plan was simple, brutal in its elegance. We wouldn't destroy Daniel ourselves. We would let him destroy himself. The flash drive was our weapon. Every number, every deal, every word he had spoken was a blade waiting to be turned against him. All it needed was the right audience. So we leaked it, not all at once. Just enough to draw blood, enough to make the wolves in his circle turn their heads. A transfer here, a shady shipment there, enough to plant one thought in their minds. Daniel can't be trusted, and paranoia is contagious. I watched his empire crumble, brick by brick, from the shadows. Meetings called off. Allies who once clung to him now slipping away. The man who once believed himself untouchable was suddenly surrounded by knives, and the more he flailed, the deeper he sank. One night, I followed him to the docks again, but this time he was alone. No briefcase, no allies, just Daniel, standing at the edge of the water, his reflection trembling in the black waves. He was muttering to himself, his hands clutching his head. Mom, Dad, I did it for you, for us. You don't understand. His voice broke. He dropped to his knees, his sobs echoing against the steel of the shipping containers. My heart twisted. For one fleeting moment, I saw the boy again, the boy with scraped knees and peanut butter on his face. But the boy was gone. And the man had tried to kill us. I stepped back, silent, unseen. The time wasn't right. Not yet. The right moment came days later. Daniel had called a meeting, a desperate attempt to assert control, to prove he was still king. The warehouse was packed with faces hardened by greed and suspicion. He stood at the center, his voice loud, his words frantic. "They're trying to ruin me," he shouted. Someone's feeding lies, but it's not true. I handled it. I silenced it. And then the screen lit up. Michael's voice echoed from the speakers, calm and steady. A recording, pulled straight from the flash drive. I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, but if you won't let me protect you, I'll have to silence you. The room froze. Every eye turned to Daniel, his face drained of color. No, he stammered, his hands shaking. It's fake. But then the second video played, the board, the photographs, us, and that's when Michael and I stepped out of the shadows. The gasp that rippled through the room was louder than the recording. Daniel's eyes locked on ours, wide, wild, his lips parting in disbelief. You're dead, he whispered. I stepped closer, my voice calm, sharp as a blade. That's what you wanted, Daniel, but you failed. His knees buckled. He looked around wildly, but no one moved to defend him. His empire had abandoned him in the moment he needed them most. And there it was, the reversal. He wasn't the predator anymore. He wasn't the king. He was just a frightened boy, stripped bare before the world. Michael's voice cut through the silence. You tried to bury us, but the truth always rises. And in that moment, Daniel knew the ghosts he tried to silence had come back, not to haunt him, but to end him. The warehouse was silent except for Daniel's ragged breathing. His eyes darted from me to Michael, searching, begging for some escape that wasn't there. His lips trembled as he whispered, I didn't want to. I had to. They would have killed me if I didn't. For a moment, all the rage inside me wavered. He wasn't the monster in that instant. He was my son, broken, terrified, cornered by choices that had twisted him into someone we barely recognized. The men around him began to leave, one by one, their silence louder than any verdict. His empire was gone. His power had collapsed. And still he looked at us, not with hatred, but with something worse. Desperation. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, please, tell me you understand. Tell me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to reach out, to pull him into my arms, to tell him it was all a nightmare and that my little boy was still in there somewhere. But I couldn't. Not after the cliff, not after the blood. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on his. Daniel, I will always love the boy you were, but the man you became, he made his choice. Tears welled in his eyes. His knees gave out, and he sank to the floor, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, I saw it, the weight of everything crashing down on him, the empire, the lies, the silence, and beneath it all, the lost child we had once raised. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. His voice was low, firm. This isn't ours to finish. Let the truth do what we couldn't. We turned and walked away, leaving him there in the wreckage of his own making. The authorities came soon after. The flash drive, the recordings, the accounts. It was enough to lock him away for years, maybe forever. We didn't stay to watch. We didn't need to. Daniel had built his own prison long before the bars closed around him. Back in the quiet of our home, our true home, rebuilt from shadows, I stood at the window and looked out at the dawn. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. But it wasn't joy that filled me. It was grief. We had won. But the victory was hollow, because no matter how much we had exposed, no matter how far Daniel fell, we couldn't bring back the boy we had lost. I keep his photograph on the mantle still. The one where he's 10 years old, grinning with a tooth missing, his eyes wide with dreams. That boy is gone, but I like to think, in some way, he still lives in the memory of who he once was. Michael came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. We survived. Yes, I said, tears slipping down my cheeks, but at what cost? The sunrise spilled golden light across the room, and for the first time, I let myself believe in something new. That even in the ashes of betrayal, there can be healing. That even in the silence left behind, there can be peace. And as the day began, I spoke words meant for my son, wherever he was, behind walls, behind regrets, or lost to the boy he once had been. I forgive you, Daniel, but I will never forget.